Commission meeting for January 30th to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Chair Sattler,
Present.
Mr. Borders,
Here.
Mr. Doors,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. Tingle, here, Mr. Wiggins.
Here.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. Commissioner George, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matters that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none. We don't have the minutes from the, I don't believe we have the minutes from the 15th.
That's correct, sir.
Any modification of agenda?
No modification to the agenda. And while you mentioned it, just note this isn't our usual use, so usual room that we meet in, a little disorganized in here, a little bit in tight quarters while they're working on the Sierra room, so apologize for that. In fact, we already split up this planning commission meeting into two meetings. We already had half the items on the 15th. So
They're putting
we'll make it
new
through this
audio
one.
and video, I believe, in the Sierra room. That should be ready when we go next week. Anyway, so we apologize for the tight quarters. First item on the agenda, E1 SUP-18-181 for possible action to consider a request for a special use permit to allow a 180-day extended stay RV resort with up to 277 RV spaces on property zone tourist commercial. The subject of property is located at 1400 Old Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-40. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. As the chair indicated in the introduction of this item, the applicant is requesting approval of a special use permit for an RV resort with 277 spaces, amenities, and a maximum stay of 180 days. A similar project was proposed on this site, and was before the Planning Commission in 2016. At that time, there were 215 RV spaces proposed for an extended stay of 180 days. The Planning Commission approved the application, but the approval was appealed by neighboring property owners. And prior to the appeal hearing, the applicant withdrew the special use permit. The parcel is zoned tourist commercial, which allows for RV parks with a maximum stay of 30 days without obtaining a special use permit. However, the special use permit is required for extended stays up to 180 days. The parcel is approximately 38 acres in size, and over the years, if you've been to the site, you can see that grading has occurred on the property, and it's created an elevated area in the eastern portion of the property. And additionally, the entire site is slightly higher in elevation than the surrounding properties. Properties in the north and east are vacant and are owned by the city and the airport authority. The property immediately east of the project site and west of the runway will remain as open space for a runway safety area. To the south is the Hot Springs Resort, as well as vacant property, and the neighboring properties to the west are single-family residences. There will be full water and sewer and electric hookups for the RV spaces. Amenities will include a clubhouse, general store, caretaker's residence, fitness center, restrooms, showers, laundry facility, walking paths, and bocce ball court. Construction will be in 3 phases. Phase 1 will include the check-in building, manager's residence, laundry and restroom facilities, the general store, 127 RV spaces, as well as open space and walking trails. Phase 2 will include 79 RV spaces, shower and bathroom facilities, and open space.
and Phase 3 will include 71 spaces, the remaining restroom facilities, clubhouse, fitness center, and the remaining open space. We've received several comment letters. You have those either in your packet or as late material. I'd like to take some time to address the concerns that are outlined in some of those letters. Several folks have indicated that they feel the density is too high for the area. According to city code, the total density for an RV park cannot exceed 30 RV sites per acre. The project site is 38.61 acres. So with the 277 RV spaces, the total density would be 7.17 spaces per acre, which is well below the allowed 30. The question was also raised about the 180 days being considered transient versus a more permanent use. So per city code, 180 days is still considered transient for the purposes of land use. Transient dwelling purposes is defined in city code as the continual rental of an RV space or spaces to the same person for a period not to exceed 28 days for short term or 180 days extended stay. So the 180 days is transient for the purposes of land use. However, it's not transient for the purposes of the room rental tax, which I'll talk about next. Staff has included a condition of approval, in condition 31, requiring the owner or operator to comply with Carson City Municipal Code as it relates to the room rental tax. This means generally for shorter stays, 28 days or less, the transient occupancy tax would apply and the applicant should be collecting that tax. For longer stays, longer than 28 days, the tax would not apply. There have been a lot of questions raised with regard to proximity to the airport. I want to assure you that the airport has been involved in this from the beginning. The airport managers provided comments to staff, and we've incorporated those comments as conditions of approval. For example, condition 24 will require the applicant, prior to issuance of any building permit, to submit for a Form 7460-1 review with the FAA. This provides notice to the FAA and gives them an opportunity to review the project for obstructions and other hazards. This is not required prior to approval of a special use permit, but it is required as a condition of approval. Condition 25 will require the applicant, prior to issuance of any building permits, to execute and record an navigation and noise easement in favor of the airport. Condition 26 will require the installation of signage notifying guests of the proximity to the airport and the opportunity for low-flying aircraft and associated noise with that aircraft. And condition 30 will require the owner or manager to implement a notification process for all guests, notifying them on check-in of their proximity to the airport and the associated noise. Guests will be required to sign an acknowledgement of this notification. Also regarding the airport, there was question about the status of the funds granted from the FAA for the purchase of the subject property. I did reach out to the airport manager, and according to him, the funds were granted for the purchase of the property in the area where the parcels are across from Gonai Road, west of the runway, and east of the subject property. The subject property was never part of that purchase. Neighboring residents have also expressed concerns with regard to privacy. A 20-foot buffer is required around the entire site. The buffer provided between the nearest RV space and the residents along the western boundary is a minimum of 100 feet. The uses within this buffer area include drainage, landscaping, and storage. Walking paths are not proposed in this area. Additionally, condition 12 requires the installation of a 6-foot tall site obscuring fence or wall and vegetative screening. Staff is requiring that the fence and the screening be installed with phase 1 of the project. And finally, light pollution. Condition 13 requires exterior lighting to be consistent with the lighting plan that was submitted as part of this application. The lighting and photometric plan that was submitted shows that the lighting will be contained on site and there won't be overflow of light pollution onto adjacent properties or into the night sky. There are 7 findings of fact, as you all know, that the Planning Commission must make in the affirmative in order to approve a special use permit. Staff has made all 7 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval of the subject special use permit, subject to the recommended conditions. I'd like to point out that the ability to make finding 4 is dependent upon the approval of the growth management application, which you'll consider next as the Growth Management Commission. Condition 2 has been incorporated to ensure that the growth management application, if the growth management application is not approved, any approval of the special use permit would be null and void. Rachel Kreider is here with RCI on behalf of the applicant, and she may wish to make some comments as well. And with that, I'm available for questions.
I have comments from staff. Just a couple of quick questions. The airport, is that 24 hours operation at that airport, county building, or is it just, you know what the hours of operation are?
I don't know offhand. Somebody else might know.
And the way that parcel is constructed with the flat area, I believe, wasn't that fill from other construction area or whatever brought in and compacted at that time?
Leaf Level Community Development Director. Yeah, it's a number of years ago now. It was moved there from another project.
Right.
Or freeway. From the
Oh, from the
freeway
freeway,
project.
that's
Yeah,
right.
Stephen Boucher from the engineering did here. And that was a while ago. That was.
Because it came up last time and that was all compacted at the
But
time. It would have to
whether or not it was compacted to the requirements
Right.
before, it would have to be for any new development on there.
They'll be checking that
Check.
before. Other questions for staff? Commissioner Borders?
First of all, if the applicant did not desire to change the period of time to 180 days, would we have considered this at all?
No, this would not be before the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Stays up to 30 days do not require review by the Planning Commission.
All right. Condition 29. On-site RV storage areas approved for temporary use of guests. Why, if somebody's living in an RV, would they need a temporary place to park an RV?
I would defer to the applicant on that to expand, but what has been explained to me is that there are occasions where somebody that's staying in the RV park might want to leave for a couple of days, move their RV to the storage area, and come back after they've gone on their trip
I'll
off-site.
hold this. Thank you.
Other questions for staff?
I've got one.
Commissioner Doris?
Commissioner Doors, on condition 12, are we able to increase from 6 foot to a higher number during this meeting, the requirement of 6 foot to a higher footage?
If the commission feels that that should be required, then you do have the ability to do that. It would require, I believe, a building permit for anything over 6 feet.
Just and a little further clarification for everyone. When this came through in 2016, Commissioner Borders and I were the only 2 commissioners there that are still here at the time. So this, in essence, is coming before the commission, basically, except for 2 of us. I remember a lot of discussion, et cetera, about the timeframes and all that at that time, and I'm sure that'll come up through this. I just wanted to clarify that before we proceed. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Commissioner Wiggins. I noticed in one of the comments, they discussed how state law calls these mobile home parks. And can you explain any more on that? How state law would call a 3-month, I believe, stay a mobile home park versus this asking for 180 days? normally I see state laws trumping local law.
So state law in this case, they consider it a mobile home park, and they would have jurisdiction over certain aspects of the park. However, the city still considers it an RV park for the purposes of special use permit. So they would have to comply with both local and state regulations.
Any questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come forward, please? Please state your name for the record, please.
Rachel Kreider from Resource Concepts.
Before proceeding, are you in agreement with all the 31 conditions of approval?
Yes, and we've been over them thoroughly with the owner, and he's in agreement with them.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to add to Heather's presentation?
Heather was very thorough. Just a couple things to point out. I know that there's a lot of concern, particularly from the neighbors, the residential neighbors, and the airport neighbors. Just to reiterate a couple points, we've been careful in design and trying to be good neighbors. The lighting is one. We're not proposing any lighting adjacent to the west side boundary near the residences. It's all downward facing. The noise issue, I know there was some question about quiet hours. It's pretty standard to have quiet hours at RV parks. We did speak to the owner specifically on this point and anticipate quiet hours at 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., which would be in line with typical municipal, if not a little bit more time for quiet hours. Another point too, just from an operations standpoint, we've provided full hookups for the whole RV park, so that should eliminate some of the noise concerns for things like generators. I know that that's often a noise concern with RV parks. Also, there's not a septic dumping station because, again, it's full hookups, so we don't have that as a concern. With respect to the screening on the west boundary of the property, in addition to the 6-foot-tall fence, we're also proposing what is often referred to as a living fence. So fairly dense after 3 or 4 years of growth, and more likely higher than 6 feet. Well, it would be like higher than the 6-foot sided steering wall. So that would provide additional buffering that would be more attractive than just the fence as well. We're aware of the maximum heights for FAA. We're aware of the requirement for the application with the FAA. All of the traffic for this property would be routed through Old Hot Springs Road. None of it comes to the residential area to the west. There is an emergency access only for the fire department. As Heather said, that the current density is relatively very light density as far as RV parks go. The owner intends to develop the park as a high-end, relatively low-density RV resort. And just sort of as a point, it's much less dense than any of the other RV resorts currently in this area. So just as a sort of frame of reference for when thinking about RV resorts here. I know there was a concern about the fill. We have done a geotechnical investigation there and have engineering solutions for dealing with that, so that's not an issue. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I tried to address concerns that we had.
Under phase 1, it mentions check-in, building, managers, residence, laundry facilities, restrooms. And then it mentions phase 2, bathroom, showers, phase 3, bathroom, showers. Were there deep bathroom showers with phase 1 as well? Or
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't in that description.
Yeah, it's for the RV code. There's a certain number of each fixture that you have to have based on the number of RV spaces. So we have, that meets all those regulations for restrooms and showers.
And the lighting, I'm sure, was acceptable to the airport as well. I'm sure they reviewed that as well before, so it was approved by both you folks and the...
Right, and we did do a major plan review back in March of last year, and the airport was part of that as well. We had good conversation.
And you mentioned generators.
Right.
Is there going to be, I mean, can people, if I were in there, I wouldn't mind the guy next door, is there going to be generator rules about, only an emergency case or whatever? Or can someone just pull in there and fire off a generator?
I can't speak to that because that's more of an operations issue. We didn't speak to the owner directly about whether he wanted to have regulations for that, but honestly, there's full electricity hookups that are included in your cost, so I don't see why someone would be running a
I think to
generator.
be a good neighbor, you wouldn't want to be running your generator.
And really, you'd be spending money you didn't need to
Right,
spend.
didn't need to spend. That's all I had for the moment. Other questions for the Commissioner?
Commissioner Tingle. So I have a couple of different areas that I'm a little bit concerned about. Access to the park itself. So you are coming off of College Parkway, taking if you're coming off the freeway, taking a left onto Research Way and a left onto Old Hot Springs Road.
Right, that's one way you can go, yes.
Yes, otherwise you're going to Gonai and taking a left and taking a left, which is, why would you do that? But there are several state offices, as I recall, having worked in one of them for a number of years. So I'm thinking access isn't going to be that easy because you don't have left turn light. You have a blinking yellow light for the most part when you make a left off of College Parkway onto Research Way. So I think the traffic, while it states there is no detrimental effect to the traffic in the area, I think that's somewhat naive, be that as it may. The water usage is another huge concern of mine. It always has been. It always will be. We live in a desert. The more we build, the more we have a less than robust winter, such as we're having now. When you're looking at going from 15,500 gallons of water usage per day to 68,000 gallons of water usage per day, that causes me a little bit of concern. So in general, I think those are two aspects where if we're not addressing those, then we're not doing our due diligence in making sure that this is not going to have any kind of detrimental effect on the neighbors, which I can't imagine it's not, and on the water usage, which we're already paying for water from Douglas County and Lyon County. So those two items, I think, are significant when addressing this development.
Right. And I did have a conversation with Stephen Forte just this week about that water use. And I know there was some concern about, doesn't 150 gallons per RV space seem high? And I agree, yes. Because we came in with a conservative estimate. There is not, a tariff rate or any set rate in Carson City for RV parks per RV space. There are in some other jurisdictions. And so we looked at a couple of those. We also looked at what NDEP's guidance is for sewer, which you'll see, and you probably saw in that as well, which is less than the water. There also is not any actual representative water use for RV parks in Carson City that we were able to get for various reasons, commingling meters and things like that. So I am confident in saying the figure that we have in this currently is on the high side, because we wanted to come in a little high with that understanding that we're going to bring it back down, that we're going to refine that estimate to be a more accurate representation of RV parks in this area. So we're doing research on, RV park per space usage in surrounding areas as we can get it. So I agree that the 150 gallons is high, but that was the best information we were able to use for that. And like I said, we wanted to come in a little bit high and bring it back down with that. Another really important point with the water usage also is that it assumes 100% occupancy from the get-go as well. So, I'm sure the owner would love to have 100% occupancy, but it's not probably realistic most times of the year. There's also going to be slow times of the year. But as far as per day use, and as an engineering judgment, we always go with the highest, right? And then we can refine it a little bit better from that. With regard to the traffic, we do have a traffic letter in here that's basically it falls below what necessitates a full traffic study. We do also expect that the peak times of coming in and going out may not align, because I know with the office, it's got a pretty tight peak traffic window. So as far as traffic movements, like I said, it falls below the threshold for a full study. but we do have the traffic impact
That can be us,
I just want, yeah, I'd actually like to have Steve input to answer the question a little bit to water usage. Even though we have this growth management item after this, that is the water usage issue of it. To the extent that that may impact your decision on this, I'd like a bit of an answer to that. And just for the audience's benefit, growth management is required for water usage of over 15,000 gallons per day. That's whether it's on a restaurant, on a half-acre property, or a 38-acre property, or a 100-acre property. It's a flat line, and it requires a review over that. But, so that's the purpose of that. But I'd like to have, to answer your question, Stephen, can you kind of talk a little bit about the water usage? How the water usage on this relates to what might otherwise be there?
And a little other input, the water from Douglas County is to prevent us from having to put an arsenic plant in. We have to blend in order to do that, and it's not necessarily, there's not any water.
Oh, no, there's plenty of water, we just have to dilute it.
All right, so I'll just give you the information I was planning to give you for the growth management item. I was actually expecting them to be the same, occur at the same time, but. So for this project, as Mrs. Kreider pointed out, for sewer, they're expecting 33,000 gallons per day. 82% of that is from the RV spaces. 18 is contributed by amenities. And again, the 100 gallons per day that they used for the RV spaces is from NDEP's design guidelines manual for on-site sewage disposal, so essentially septic systems. The current capacity of the wastewater treatment plant is 6.9 million gallons per day. The plant is currently operating at about 65% of capacity, and this project at those estimates would add 0.5%. On water, the subject parcel is in the 4960 pressure zone. The whole water system is broken into different pressure zones, how it operates. And that includes the Quill treatment plant and several groundwater wells. And there's also a Quill storage tank. For the fire flow, they're expecting 1,500 gallons per minute for 2 hours to be the design fire flow. And that's based on the size of the clubhouse, which is the largest building. And that's assuming that they're using sprinklers. And based on recent data for flow testing, we expect to be able to deliver 4,800 gallons per minute, which is about 300% of the flow required. In that fire flow design event, if you have 1,500 gallons per minute for 2 hours, that would use about 4.5% of the storage capacity we have in that Quill tank, which is for situations like that where you have really high unexpected flows. On the domestic water side, as we pointed out, 68,500 gallons per day. 61% of that's from the RV spaces, 21% from amenities, and 18% from landscape irrigation. Again, the domestic water that they used, as Rachel pointed out, is conservative. They came up with 150 gallons per day, and that's based on an average of a few different numbers that they were able to find from different agencies, including NDEP, which is that 100 gallons per day number we heard earlier, Truckee Meadows Water Authority, and Perone Utility Company. Recently, Atkins, I believe this is finished, we're doing a build-out water usage study, and for their projections for this parcel, based on the master plan designation, their estimate for the domestic water use was within 3% of what RCI is proposing. So our study estimating what we expect for full build out of the city anticipated a similar use to what we're seeing here. and the water system's current max day demand is 20 million gallons per day, and this project would make up about 0.4% of that. So I know it's a lot of numbers. If you want me to repeat anything or give you clarification, let me know.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
Yeah.
Commissioner Gordon?
On, back to number 12, which I was talking about before, 6 foot seems a little low just because it's pretty much the standard residential fence height for most people, and we're trying to add a little, privacy with that. Would the applicant be opposed to raising that? You'd have to get a construction permit, or building permit, but raising that to 8 foot. And I also think removing wall, I like the site obscuring fence with the vegetative screening, making that just kind of a condition. Let's just do like an 8 foot fence with vegetative screening. So that way people have 2 foot higher than most residential fences, and it's nice and vegetative instead of a nice concrete wall or something like that. Would that be acceptable?
Well, I can definitely say they would prefer a 6 foot fence, particularly because they're going to be spending quite a lot of money on landscaping in order to have that dense, almost a hedge that's going to be higher than the 6 foot wall and would be higher than the 8 foot wall. Yes.
Oh, I just, when you're done, I can add a question or whatever on that same line.
Yeah, sure.
This fence is gonna be on the property line, correct, over by the residence?
Correct.
Which is 100 feet from the nearest RV
Correct.
spot.
Correct, but, well, right. So my concern isn't so much from someone's RV window, but that, I know you can get through reading through this that privacy is a concern, and putting a 6 foot fence next to a 6 foot fence doesn't add any privacy. So it doesn't work. So, I appreciate what you're saying. That's a big concern, and I would like the commission to consider raising that to 8 foot vegetative fence with vegetative screening.
I'm sure they would consider it, and I don't think, right offhand it would be a deal breaker. I would just point out the other mitigating factors, and then also that there's a drainage channel along that side that really precludes people from walking along that fence, because it's going to be the fence, the vegetation, and then a pretty large drainage channel, and then the rest of the park, so.
Commissioner Gordon?
I would like to address the elephant in the room, which is the 180-day stay. If this was a truly resort RV park with a maximum of 180-day stay, we wouldn't even be doing this. You'd be out building your RV park. I just wonder what the marketing logic is behind the concept of you going to get high-end Newell type and Airstream type campers to spend the summer 6 months in Carson City at 270 a day, 270 people a day. It just doesn't, those people don't stay 6 months. What they do is they'll buy an RV spot in a park like this that sells them, and then they'll come and live in their own, quote, condo RV. And, but a 180-day stay makes us look not like an RV park or a resort or high-end. It makes it look like a trailer park. And to me, that really doesn't seem to fit any kind of scenario that I can come up with for if I was going to build a resort RV park in Carson City. And I just don't understand the logic.
Right, and I understand your point. I think kind of where the gray area is there is that for the purposes of the RV park, it's either 30 days or 180 day stay. There isn't, an in-between of, well, we want to have allowed a 90-day stay or anything like that. So I agree, it could be an outlier that wants to come stay for 6 months. I don't think that's going to be the norm at all. But it does allow the flexibility for someone to come stay for 45 days or, 2 months or something like that. So the majority, I don't think we're gonna expect the whole park to be there on extended stay. But the current model, from what I understand, of most RV parks, is to have the extended stay so that they at least have that allowed to them, so that they can get that market.
But I will tell you,
Yeah.
in my experience, and I have experienced these RV parks, I've managed them, is that 90 days is a maximum.
And that
90 days is a maximum, not 180 days. And it just doesn't make any sense to me to be going through this agony with all these people here, when if I showed up at your RV park and I stayed 30 days and I want to spend another 2 weeks, if at worst case scenario, I have to move over 2 spaces. Because I'm in essence then checked out and checked in. I mean, that's a whole lot easier to accomplish what you want to do with your 10 or 15 people that want to stay more than a month or 2 months, as opposed to creating a 180-day elephant.
Well, and planning staff might be able to address this better, but it's my understanding that the 30-day stay is that you have to leave at least for a day before you can come back. But the difference in getting the...
Now, that's for tax.
That's what I'm saying, that's my understanding of the way that the regulation is right now. And what I'm trying to say is, we don't have the option we only have the options of 30 days and 180 days. We can only choose between those two, so that's why they're requesting the extended stay, which is up to 180 days. Like I said, we don't expect a huge amount of people coming and staying 180 days. But we want to be able to have that as an option for people wanting to come visit Carson City, so that they don't say, oh, well, we can't, if we decide we want to stay longer, we have to move. Let's just go to one in Reno. So that's basically what the owner is really trying to do, is trying to capture, a certain market that would go elsewhere if they didn't have that as an available option.
So you're saying, Commissioner Sadler, if you decide to make this 90 days, they couldn't do that, because it's got to be either 30 or 180, can you address that?
Heather Ferris for the record. Because this is a discretionary permit, there's no reason why the planning commission couldn't implement a maximum of a 90-day stay, for example.
Because this came up in the 16, this was the whole thing, we were hours and hours here in 16 going through the same thing, because it's the fact that, just like Mr. Porter said, we were both here. But anyway, that was the main thing that we were up against. And what's to keep them from just pulling out, driving around the park once and pulling in another? Who's going to enforce that? And we discussed that back then too. Would it be code enforcement from the city?
Yeah, I think they're meeting the intent of the ordinance, which is that people should be staying for the amount of time that the permit's for, and that's it. And then leave and not play games to stay there longer. So I think they're doing the right thing in getting the permit.
Now, in the tax situation, if they're there 30 days or less, they pay the tax.
Or it's 28
It's
days.
28 days
Okay,
for
we'll say
the-
28 days, but if they sign up for 180, they don't pay any tax?
Anything over 28 days?
They pay the 28 days. and
Anything
then
over
it's over that
28
is
days, they
tax.
do not pay the room rental tax.
And
28 days or less, they do pay the room
If they
rental
stay
tax.
there a month,
And
they
that's a
don't pay the tax.
generalization of the code, which we don't enforce in the planning department. So it's a generalization.
because that was a
of the
big
code.
issue then too, is when did it, Other question, Commissioner Kingham?
I just did the math, and I have made 4,160 trips walking that pathway between Markway and the hot springs. So when you're talking about privacy, I just don't think that you have a concept really of what that's going to mean to those people that live on Markway and the next block up, which I believe is Louise, but I'm not sure. And the impact to the wildlife, which frankly, nobody's going to be surprised by this. I like four-legged critters a whole lot more than I like two-legged ones sometimes. So there is a huge population, if you will, of four-legged critters in that that area that are gonna obviously be seriously displaced. But my main point is the privacy that those people enjoy at the end of those streets is gonna be seriously impacted, and I understand that the city went through the 7 findings and that there is no detrimental impact to the enjoyment of the neighborhoods, but I just don't see how that is possible when you are looking at going from a naked piece of land to suddenly now you have 277 RV spaces. So I just think that that's something that really is going to determine how I vote on this particular project. And I just wanted to make about that.
Another question for staff, if it were not an RV park and other uses that would go in there, what is the footage on that west side, the max minimum it could be? If they put something else in there, would it be 20 feet? Yeah, the setback.
I think it's 30 feet between commercial uses and residential.
30 feet, I believe, yes, and they're gonna be 100 feet.
Yeah. And the findings and the baseline, so we're dealing with land use, so we're dealing with zoning, and people can do the uses that are permitted by zoning. And that's kind of the baseline when you look at the findings and why there's things as special use permits. It's what, special use permits are conditional uses where maybe it's okay, but maybe there's some circumstances that require extra conditions to mitigate those things. It's not whether or not this property can be not developed and basically taken from the property owner because we're not going to allow anything there. And so in the findings in land use, it's really, is it consistent? The baseline, is it consistent with the zoning that is designated, the development density that it's designated for?
And as I've said before, if you want the critters or the view or whatever, you need to own the property. You want to buy it, the view and the critter, I mean, you can't stop growth. But again, the whole thing in this, that went back and forth is, I remember this, if there were 30 days, they wouldn't even have to be here.
Well, and then I have that question too, because I agree with Commissioner Tingle as far as the four-legged critters are concerned. But I just want to clarify and not beat a dead horse. I do want to clarify it is, if it's specifically, they could build the RV park as designed, everything exactly the same, and it's limited to 30 days, even if we all vote no today.
Correct.
Or, 30 days, right?
That's correct.
So it's only voting on whether it's 30
They're
days.
basically doing 180 days.
So they're there anyways.
And as far as the privacy issue goes, again, like I just pointed out, it would be 30 feet if anything else is in there, whatever, and they're getting, and it's 100 feet.
Yeah, makes sense.
Go ahead, Commissioner Porter.
And I don't know if it's necessarily important or not, but I noticed in all the plans, I didn't see where the trash went.
It was in, yeah, I saw it was
Yeah,
enclosed.
so the southwest corner where the maintenance area is, that's the trash area, which will be fenced. I know that was one of the conditions. was to be fully
I
fenced.
remembered seeing that the trash area was gonna be fenced, but I never
Yes,
saw in the plans.
It's the maintenance area.
Right,
And
like
that was
an-
our mistake. I think we didn't have the
Like an
enclosure.
8-yard dumpster?
I believe it was gonna be multiple dumpsters in a larger enclosure.
But it's gonna be in that corner over there.
Correct, and so their intent too, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because their intent is to have maintenance staff collect the garbage throughout the park every day, and then have one area rather than have the garbage truck, traipsing throughout the development and being a little noisier.
And again, there was an airport issue there, they were concerned about the way this was done, it was coordinated because of birds and planes and that sort of thing, it was an issue. I read there was a concern.
Yep, and we're aware of that condition and don't have an issue with that.
Commissioner Preston.
I'd like to make a statement on this one. First of all, I know the developer, and he has always done very, very well. And what he puts in, he actually promises, and he's not a fly-by-night person. He's actually been somebody that's actually put a lot of things in. The other thing I'd like to say is that I spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks actually looking into areas surrounding this community, into Churchill County, Douglas County, Washoe County, and Carson City. And at this point right now, several years ago I came in and talked to Lee and found out this was the only parcel in all of Carson City that could actually have this zoning, which I found was really fascinating. There's a need. There's a true need for RV. I can say that several years ago, I came here when I was not living in Carson City and I was living up in Washington. I came in with my motorhome and my little tow car, and I actually had to go out and borrow some land off some acreage in order to stay because Camden Town was full, Comstock was full. And the one that is in Douglas County, just south of the border, that was full. There was no Gold Dust West. So there definitely is a need for this, and I think that some people like to spend more time here in this community. When I look at a fence that's 6 feet tall with a vegetation barrier that's going to be sitting back probably 4 to 6 feet, and it's going to be exceeding the type of that. I also, as a builder, has looked at an 8-foot fence, and you have to bring in structural engineers. It's very, very expensive. And so I think that that's cost prohibitive, especially if you're going to be putting in a vegetation barrier. If you're putting in laurels, if you're putting pyrocanthia or any of that stuff, you have a setback. And it also creates the vegetation actually absorbs a lot of noise, light, that type of thing. I do not see a bunch of people walking along the perimeter trying to see into the 4 or 5 houses that are actually adjacent to this property. So, I think that's basically, you know, my statement on this is that we have a lot of people coming into this area, and I have a lot of people that I know throughout the country that have come into this area to work in this area. And we did it 60 years ago. My family came in here, and we actually brought a trailer into the Clear Creek, which is now Bodine's, in order to have a place as a resident to come in here and build, because Carson City 60 years ago was about in the same situation they are in now. So when I look at this, I think, my gosh, 60 years ago, would I have been able to be here if there was no place for me to bring in, my family to bring in a trailer, for us to be able to do construction jobs and so forth. And I think that over the 60 years, since my dad was a big developer and built over 1,000 houses in this community, I think that we did make an impact, but we came here in an RV. And so I'm very strong on this one, so.
I don't know, Lee, maybe the tourist commercial, I know at one point, when I was involved with Eagle Valley, a number of years ago, they were presenting possibly putting a 9-hole walking golf course in that area. I don't know if that would have contributed to that at that time, because with the flight zone, they couldn't do much with that out there. So that was a consideration, maybe that's where that came about at that time, I don't know.
You directed that to me. It's actually not just that property, it's on tourist commercial. It's
That whole,
the area in front of Old Hot Springs Road there, including the hot springs, but it's been zoned tourist commercial, and with the intent, it goes back to the Langston family a long time ago that had the tourist accommodation plans for that for a long time, decades now. Yeah.
other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Wiggins.
Commissioner Wiggins, are there any other extended stay places in Carson City that needed a special use permit?
I don't have the answer for that. I would only say that I think it's not unreasonable to think that there is a lot of use that is extended stay. Whether or not they have an extended stay, special use permit, I don't know.
Do you think?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the others in the area all fell under previous codes. So it's not an apples to apples comparison.
So when I know the one out, going out by Bodine's and Costco, that's been there for years and years, and it's definitely expected to stay.
The second question, Commissioner Wiggins. Did the application change on the setbacks to the homes from the previous application? In other words, now that you're going to 180 days, was that extended? Because the applicant, I guess, that was kind of their idea on, instead of going 30 days, I'm going to pack this place in and put 500 units for my 30 days. But instead, they want to go high end 180. But anyhow, the first question was, did the setbacks to the homes on the west side change from the previous?
No. The design for, and we went through the major project review last March, I think. It's largely the same plan. So his intent was always to try to be sensitive to the west side neighbors. It was just a shift in the thought of being able to welcome that market that wants longer than 30-day stay.
I think that's why the drainage was designed in over that area, that sort of thing, was to use that 100 feet more effectively and
It
save
is,
that.
and handily enough, the drainage was already
Right,
going
already
there,
going
so
down
for
the
design
drainage.
purposes, it was really great.
Other questions?
Commissioner Doors, is there, to Commissioner Preston's point, is there in this zoning or general, a code that goes over all zones, a minimum setback between fencing, between this fence in 12 and the fence along the west side of the project, that, or the property that already exists? Or could they put the fence, I mean, Ms. Preston said, well, there's gonna be a 4 or 5 foot setback, maybe, is that
Between the existing fence and the proposed 6-foot fence, I don't believe there's any setback requirement.
Yeah,
I think what Commissioner Preston was saying was there would be a 3 or 4 foot setback for the vegetation from the proposed fence.
Plan out from the fence.
Is that what you were saying, Mike?
Yes, exactly.
So,
So it's almost a double fence, is what it ends up being.
yeah, right. I'm confused about, for the applicant, I'm confused about, I understand, are you going to do two things as far as create a vegetative screening on the fence, and then also the buffer of however many feet? You mentioned a different length of 4 feet of more vegetation, or are you gonna just do vegetation and we're talking a standard fence with nothing?
The intent is the 6-foot side skirting fence, and then a 4 or 5 foot buffer, and then the plants, and then the rest of the drainage channel like that. So nothing on the fence.
Yeah, okay. Well, I disagree with Commissioner Preston with I think that creates a 4 or 5 foot walkway between bushes and a fence for people to go in. And I'm not saying that's the end of the world, or that there's all sorts of nefarious people that frequent this sort of property or anything like that. I just understand putting myself in the perspective of one of these 4 or 5 property owners along that side. It seems like you're not accomplishing much with the fence itself.
I think, Commissioner Doris, like I just had to replace the fence in my property, and we lined it with some arborvitae's. We had to come out 2.5, 3 feet to give them room to grow to the fence and in. I don't think they're planting a 4 foot wide and then they plant the trees out here. I think the trees are gonna be planted along the fence with room to fill in and,
Okay.
I believe that would be.
Correct, yeah, that's correct.
So logistically, so I can get a picture in my head, there's an access road right now that runs on the east side of the houses. That goes, I think there's a power or cable or there's an NDOT yard on the one side, and then there's another building, and I don't know if it's a city building or a privately owned.
Little probation.
Is it-
Probation.
No, that's not, there's a teeny little building that comes off of this road, and it's a dirt road, and it parallels one of the NDOT yards. And then I believe there's a drainage ditch. But that dirt road, is that where the fencing is going to begin and then go east? Is that where the property line ends? Because there's this little dirt road that ends up going.
It's not a public right of way. There's a
Right,
lot of dirt trails through there.
It's actually a road, a dirt road. Yeah. And it's not
It's
named.
Holly Way.
No, it's not an actual city street, city road. I think it's just one of those roads that got created by people.
RVs and whatever
No,
else.
by people like taking their 4-wheel drive ATVs, but there are on both sides of that little dirt road that comes down onto Old Hot Springs Road, where it dead ends where the freeway cut off Old Hot Springs Road.
I'm not familiar with the exact one that you're referring to.
Yeah, so
I
I'm
know
just
there's
kind
a
of
lot
wondering-
The others are that used to go in with, coming down to where towards the casino or the bank? Or you could tell
No,
them that?
this is on
The other side.
the other side. And so I'm just trying to get a visual of where the fencing is gonna be in relation to that dirt road, which I guess you would not.
Yeah, I don't know exactly which dirt road you're referring to, but the
It's where
fencing is,
the tree full of owls used to be that they cut down and.
the fencing would be right along the west property boundary on the west side. So it would be where the residences end.
Okay.
On town side.
Well, there is.
Other questions for? Thank you. Public comment. Do we want? If you come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, my name is Linda Law. I'm the chairman of the Carson City Airport Board, Airport Authority. So far as the 180-day stay is concerned, I'm not sure that that is something that we necessarily are enamored with, but I don't think that's something that raises any more concern with us than the existence of the RV park in general, being at the end of a flyway, and the consideration of a possible engine out and that sort of thing. The city has seen fit to make a change in their lands bill with the Congress that gives us the right for a safety area to the north of that parcel, which we certainly appreciate. And my only concern is that, as we said at the previous meetings, that we don't have lights that face into the air, and that we have appropriate knowledge and notice to the people who are going to be there that there is a airport proximate to it, and all of the FAA regulations. And at that point, those are my comments. They haven't changed much since the last time we were here, but the 180 days, as a private citizen stepping away from my position on the airport, I live up in that area too, and it would seem more rational to me to have it as a shorter stay park, as you were talking, but that's not in my official position as an airport affiliate. So other than that, if you have any questions of me, fine.
And normally we don't with the public, but being that you're with the airport, if you would reiterate a little more, because it was brought up back in 2016, why the airport,
Is concerned?
Well, not as concerned, why they don't have that property or couldn't, whatever. I mean, that came up, I know, as
Right,
far as acquiring.
we acquired the property to the east of that property some years ago, and the designation for it was a overrun area in case of an engine out.
Someplace.
Yes, someplace they could go. And at this point, there's a parcel to the north of the parcel that's going to be developed here that the city has earmarked for overrun safety for the airport, which is a wonderful thing. There's also a couple parcels to the north of Arrowhead Road that have the same designation. All of those 4 parcels, the BLM grant, I think it's the BLM granted mining interest to a private party years and years and years ago, almost 100 years ago. And they have the right to mine those 4 properties, but it's in a series, so there will still be open space on those 4 parcels into the future, and that's what we're looking at for a safety zone for the airport.
And that's what I was trying to bring out for the public and for
Yes.
our members as well. The idea is, regardless of what's there, you're concerned about light, height, whatever.
Correct.
Because it's there, but there is, the idea being, there's ways to
There are
go.
mitigate
If it was solid all the way out there, we've got a real problem.
Correct.
Or possibly a real problem.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
The runway is 0.027,
Yes, yes, correct.
Thank you. And since there is quite a number of people who are probably going to be coming up, we would like you to also, if you would, sign your name as well on the sheet, so person taking, or folks taking the minutes and everything can know who's speaking. Put a name to it. You just,
Okay.
just leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next. That's it.
Christopher Simmons. They were talking about the taxes, 28 days.
Yes.
There's someone can post a tax on that, and so you're military, prior military, you're exempt. Can someone else come back in and put it on there without your knowledge?
I'm not sure.
Are you talking about hotel motel tax?
No, like on your home, on this, on your RV. So you come in and say, oh, you're prior military, or you, whatever, they give you a break on it. Can someone else come in and put it on there and you don't know about it and they have you have to move out or
Oh, I
something?
see what you're saying. If normally you would get a tax break, being military, that would be a decision of the people running the property or whatever.
Well, the room rental tax is the same
That's-
as if you were staying in a hotel, for example. So that applies to everybody across the board regardless of their affiliations or anything.
So that wouldn't happen, or that couldn't happen due to laws.
So are you talking about personal property tax maybe on the RV itself?
Yes.
Tax on the RV itself?
Yeah, that's a separate issue.
So that wouldn't happen on?
No.
This doesn't change, this doesn't change any.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll finish it. Hi, my name is Dan Mervis, and I live at 1001 Arrowhead Drive. So that property is in the noticing area, but I'm not exactly contiguous to this project. I guess I have a lot in between me and a buffer. So here is my concern, and I really have 3 or 4 questions, and I don't know how the procedures go, but if it's possible that the committee or the staff can answer these, they would be fabulous. My fear, like with what I'm sure other people are going to say, is with the 180-day stay, as other people have talked about. I fully get what's going on here. I understand that it's tourist commercial, and 30 days is just a given. The property owner can do that. Obviously, there is some value between 31 days and 180 that the property owner is pursuing. My concern with that 180-day limit is that I just don't know how the heck that would ever get enforced. So that's my first question for staff or for the planning commission is, what is the enforcement on this type of thing? And the answer that I'd like to have would be, here is the existing enforcement we do on properties or businesses of this type today. Not the, well, ideally something happens. I'd like to know if there is any enforcement at all. Now, why am I asking about that? Well, I don't own an RV. Actually, never been in an RV in my life. So I don't mean to offend anyone, but I'll just be frank. I see a possible slippery slope between an RV and trailer park. Now, this is a very nice neighborhood around here. It is a semi-rural area of Carson City. The guy across the street from me on Louise has horses, people have large lots. I mean, my lot's over an acre. And I just fear that with no enforcement mechanism, it goes from the vacationer and the tourist to possibly a trailer park. And it possibly goes to a low-income housing development placed right in the neighborhood that I purchased a nice house in. Now, I understand that $277 a night or whatever the quoted figure is, that's not the low-income housing development. But That's the proposed business plan. What happens in 3 years or 5 years if this thing isn't getting traction and there's no enforcement? Are we okaying a low-income housing development in a nice neighborhood? And that's not a service to the rest of the community and the homeowners that are there. So I'd like to know about that, and I definitely feel that a 30-day situation obviously has a lot more chance of being enforced. If you think that enforcement isn't an issue, go to the Walmart that is almost at the Douglas County line. There are RVs parked there all the time, and they're kind of broken down little bodegas and that sort of thing. I mean, there's obviously an enforcement problem there. So that's number one. Number two, which I'd like to find out an answer on, the storage issue. I don't know if this is important or not. I don't know if it's essential to the RV park, but the definition of recreational vehicle park in Chapter 18 says no storage. So I was just curious as to why storage was just lumped in here. And I'm not saying that I know all 128 pages of this briefing, but there didn't seem to be a justification for why storage is being granted and we are throwing out the definition of no storage of unoccupied RVs in an RV space. The final thing is there's talk about the fence, whether it be 6 feet or whether it's 8 feet. I don't know if this is a condition of how these barriers were prescribed, but no one seems to talk about the line of sight. No one has said, oh, if we have 6 feet in vegetation, then the properties will not see a potential eyesore of an RV park. Or if we go to 8 feet, we will not see the eyesore of an RV park. And you can't just say 8 feet and setback. I mean, realize there are elevation changes all over the place. So I'm in the noticing area. I haven't heard anything of noticing area people will not see this. I've only heard, oh, light won't come through, or people inside the RV park won't see out. So that would be my third question, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
We'll just take the, normally in our normal meetings, we don't address as you people are speaking. We'll make notes and then we'll try to answer what we can at the end. Otherwise, we're going to be here much longer than we were in 2016, which was several hours. And not that it's not all, we want to hear from you all, so to expedite, we'll just make notes and then respond because there may be duplication, whatever. So, okay. Next person would like to come forward. Go ahead.
Commissioners, staff, my name is Doug Hoos. I'm not a resident in Carson City. However, I do have an RV, and I have stayed in multiple parks on a monthly basis in the Reno Sparks area, Virginia City, and all that. RV living is a nice way to go from time to time. And let me just say, I've also studied the RV market considerably. There were a lot of great questions that were asked today. I'm sure I could answer a majority of those as well, and love to address a lot of that. I know I've got limited time here, so let me just point out a few things. First off, it's really not impossible for an RV park to survive without extended stays, okay? Especially in these winter climates that we have here in this area. So it's really important if you want the economic impact of what an RV park like this could bring to this area, you've got to consider an extended stay. I just was looking at the numbers of the last 2 months that I stayed in Virginia City and Sparks and what I spent up there. It was $1,200 in rent, but I also spent another $2,500 of dining, food, gas, parts, service, everything like that. If you just do the math, now it only comes out to about $60 a day that I was spending. It comes out to about a $6 million impact for one person at this 277 spaces if it was occupied. So the economic impact here is huge. To let this RV park owner and property owner walk, which they potentially could do, because the extended stay is that key part of an element to survive during the winter months, you're potentially making that kind of a decision. And then who knows what actually could go into that parcel, 38 acres down the road as well. So I really stress that you really take all of that into consideration. The other thing I did is, you know, we've got a home in Folsom that I looked at the water bill for 4 people to live in that home the last couple of years, and what the baseline was for that. And on gallons per day, if you exclude the summer months, because it's really hot in that area, we were burning about 230 gallons a day with 4 people and 2 teenage daughters taking extensive showers and everything like that, but it's still 230 gallons per day. But if you exclude the summer months and just use that same baseline, it comes down to 128 gallons per day, okay? Now let me assure you that in an RV, particularly RVs today, they are so water conservative, and you also have a culture of RVers. I mean, they basically conserve water to the nth degree, and it's almost impossible to burn through a substantial amount of water. So I'm very confident that 100 gallons per day for an RV that they're estimating here on a usage is substantially less than that. It's probably, I mean, it's between 60 and 80 gallons per day, and then we are already talking about, you know, you're not going to have 100% occupancy, so 80% occupancy is a typical percentage of all the RV parks in the area, because I've studied all this. And when you factor that in, that drops those numbers down again substantially. So your actual impacts are going to be quite a bit less. And here, I'm a former accountant, so I've done all my analysis, and here's my expenses and everything like that. Now, there were some great questions. Let me just try to address a couple things. RVers are like, they hibernate. It's actually amazing to me when you stay in an RV park. You rarely have people out, certainly during the winter months. When that sun goes down, they're gone. They certainly aren't running their generators, because you're going to use the power, the electricity that the park's providing. So they're connecting with that service as well. As far as traffic impacts, when you actually go to a 180-day stay, you actually have people there that are longer. They're planning to be there longer. They have less trips. They certainly aren't driving their RV on the roads as much. And I think you have some concern potentially, I'm not sure, I don't want to overstate here, but it's concerns about the traffic signal at Research Way, and maybe if that was a safety hazard because it was never a full left turn there. But anyway, you know, you limit the number of RVs by going to the extended stay that are going to actually be turning left on the Research Way. And so I think that's an increased safety feature by doing that instead of being transient there. Something else to point out, the growth in the RV industry is huge today. They've been selling over 500,000 units a year for the last several years. They've had 9 consecutive years of extensive growth. The millennials, the baby boomers, everybody's adopting this culture of the RV. In fact, we may not even see millennials and other generations buying the big mega houses that we have. They're going to smaller houses and stuff like that. It's actually a generation, and the baby boomer generation, that you want to attract to this area. You want that tourist dollars. And you know, the amount of money that's being spent out there is huge, and you're passing that up if you let a park like this not come forward. Again, the quiet hours, I mentioned that, you know, rarely is anybody out outside there. It was mentioned that maybe down the road that this park might deteriorate, might go down the hill. You know, when you look at what this park entails, I would estimate this park is going to cost $12 to $16 million to develop fully. Somebody that puts in $12 to $16 million over phases is absolutely not going to let that park deteriorate. They're going to manage that to the nth degree and make a lot of great decisions with respect to it. So it's critically important for them to make sure that nothing deteriorates there and they lose those dollars there. So nobody's going to let a $16 million project go down the road, out the door. 10-year rule. Many RV park owners adopt a 10-year rule, meaning if your RV park is older than 10 years, we really don't want you here unless we do an inspection of that RV park. And what that does is it helps to keep the, let's say, riffraff out of your RV park. And I know that's a concern. When you're in a neighborhood, in a residential area, that's definitely a concern. So it's important, and I know this RV park owner is going to implement a 10-year rule. Most of them do that. And a lot of them, or not a lot, majority of the parks in the area are substantially extended stay parks. There's a couple that don't operate that way, and they kick people out. They absolutely kick them out when the transient dollars are there. If the transient travelers are here, I'm pretty confident that because the numbers for them are much higher, they'll kick these people out as well. So you don't have to worry about there's not enough turnover. I think that's pretty much everything I had to say, and I appreciate all of your time, consideration here. Thank you. I'll sign this. I'll step over here so somebody else can come up.
Next.
Did you take the other piece of paper?
I'll bring it right back.
Oh,
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, I'm Tammy Lubich, and I'm one of the neighbors to the west. I live at 1001 Mark Way. I am definitely opposed to a 180-day stay there. I'm also opposed to the whole park, which you probably read my letter, and I've been opposed to it for the last 30 years. I have fought every year that it has come up. The only thing I didn't get to fight was the tourist commercial when it was changed because we weren't notified, or I would have fought the change in the land usage. I understand that the owner has a right to develop his property. I'm not against that. Low density because of the airport, and I understand that's my biggest concern. I've lived here long enough to remember the airplane that crashed in that property, right where they want to put the RV park, not on the side, not in the north, not, right there in the middle of it. You have propane tanks, you have RVs with tanks. They say 180 days, they're not going to have a propane filling station, but they're going to get the big tanks that you've seen in all the other RV parks that are in Carson City. I've driven around, and again, my concern is code compliance. My concern is the fencing, because I'm one house away from that property. But I watch people walking from the state. People ride their bicycles down through there. Kids are driving their cars, parking on that road continually. I've chased off 3 or 4 of them for my neighbor, because she doesn't want to walk out there, but I would do it. And they're just sitting there, looking into the properties. And the elevation of it and where they're putting it, I may not be able to see this way, looking straight, but they're going to be looking right down into my property, and I don't appreciate it. 30 days is long enough also. I'm also an RVer. I have an RV. I've done RV. My kind is out in the forest doing that stuff. But there's no place that I can think of that I would stay 180 days unless I wanted to live there. And if you want to live here, buy a place, get a home, stay, is my opinion. 30 days in Carson City, I don't know, you can go to Virginia City, you can go to Tahoe, you can go to Gardnerville, you can go everywhere within that 30 days. 180 days, how many places are you going to visit other than the gambling? Which is great. I mean, bringing in tourism is everything too, but every 30 days does the same thing to me as 180 days does. And then again, you get your taxes and everything.
You need to sign up.
Yeah.
You can sign. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. More public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for some response, or just Heather, do you want to respond to a couple of those or some of those? Please.
I'll start with the code enforcement. With the code enforcement and the community development department of that, so we have a couple of code enforcement officers now. So I've been with the city about 17 years, and I can say we have been out and looked at the records. We have the ability to go out and look at the records of the RV park and who's coming in to check it. It's been done in the past, but I can't say that there is a routine program to do so. Right now, and for the last, since the start of the recession, basically, it's just been on a complaint basis with a few code enforcement officers that we have, but we certainly have the ability to actually look to represent and enforce it. Mr. Mervos, we've had a little bit of question on the storage of RVs. We're not sure. You indicated that it's prohibited.
Yeah, if you look in chapter 18 of the code or ordinances, whatever you call it, where recreational vehicle park is defined. So the definition for recreational vehicle park, it says, and I could open my computer, but essentially, no vehicles shall be offered for sale or stored in any manner. It's only for the residents of people who are checked into the facility. So that's baked into the definition itself. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but I just thought that since the offering of vehicle storage, even if it's for people who are renting but away for a couple days, it seems like this is almost a variance to the definition of what this thing is, and I was just wondering why there wasn't any talk of why this variance or exception was being offered.
So these are the types of things, there's a little code cleanup needed on that, because in the tourist commercial district, under the definition there, actually recreational vehicle storage is a conditional use, which means recreational vehicle storage is allowed with a special use permit. So in as much as it's included and shown on the plans on this, it can be included. That's what
I kind of figured, but I wanted to pose the question there because I know some other people have brought it up. So that answers the question, is that the SUP sort of has that power.
And it's listed specifically in the zoning, which is inconsistent with what that says, so
okay.
In our code cleanup, that's...
Gotcha.
I was under the impression it would be like they could have another vehicle there if they were towing a car, that they could park their RV, and then they would also have a boat or whatever, or something that they could have there to use, or another vehicle or a pickup or something as well, correct?
I think that's what the representative...
Right. That's what I picked up from it as well.
And then the final question I think that needs to be addressed is the line of sight, the 6-foot vegetation and the 6-foot fence, and the vegetation screening. I don't know if Rachel can come up and maybe shed a little bit of light on it, but I do know there's going to be some grading on site, and I think it's going to knock down the height difference a little bit.
Well, so the existing plateau, that's basically, it's going to sit at that height, or is that going to change?
With respect to the line of sight, we have not done a specific line of sight analysis. But the grading on the west side of the property, so the closer to the residences, is being flattened out a little bit and graded down toward that drainage channel. Basically, we needed to do it from a design perspective so that we could still manage to get that drainage in there without having to put in a big retaining wall. So that area is going to be not significantly higher than the adjacent properties. The area to the east that is adjacent to the airport property that won't be developed, that is the larger, the higher plateau area. And the grades on that are not going to change significantly.
Because they are considerably higher than everything around there.
They are.
And that's going to have RV pads as well?
That's phase 3, yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair Sattler, were you part of the discussion? I seem to recall some discussion last time that they would look at that, because that was a good point that, and I believe there was some discussion about that before, that would be evaluated, because it might actually be better to have a fence closer to the RVs, if the RVs are in fact elevated.
That, we discussed it in 16, and that was the concern for line of sight, et cetera, that on that plateau area, you'd be better off having a 6-foot fence and the planting up around it, if you're not using the stuff on the other side, because you're sitting so high, you can put a 20-foot fence up and you're going to be able to see up on that, or 10, or whatever,
Right, for that east portion of the site, it is up really high, so I don't expect that that's going to be significantly screened if you're up close. But like I said, we haven't done a specific site analysis, but because it's so much farther away than, phases 1 and 2, there would be a lot less visibility just from the distance.
Because it's so much better.
Yeah. In conjunction with the landscaping that will be in place.
Thank you. And we go back to what was discussed in 16, and kept coming back to 30 days, you wouldn't be here, 180, what do you want, whatever. I mean, I don't know how we spent many hours discussing that. I know as far as wanting to stay or be there, I have friends right now that come up here and have a house here, and they're golfers, and they're now down in Palm Desert with their motorhome, and they're staying down there for the winter, for 4 or 5 or 6 months, because they don't want to be up here not playing golf in the wintertime. So there is the snowbird effect going both ways, of people wanting to ski, come here for the winter, or people wanting to get out of the cold, come here for the summer, so whatever. But anyway, any other, bring it back for further discussion, or?
Are there any, I know people, public came up and announced their addresses, are there any property owners of the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 occupied adjacent properties here?
Yeah.
So I live on the other side of that street, which.
No, I'm talking about, I'm just wondering about on Mark, there seems to be 2, at the end, Holly, there's 2, and then there's one on Louise that backs up to about half of their backyard is adjacent to the property.
We're on Holly. The one of them on Mark, the lady was ill and was not able to make it tonight, otherwise she would have been here.
So we would have had 1 here out of the 5.
We're on Holly Way. He's here also, so there's 2.
If you back up to the property?
Yes.
Yes, and Becky Mabry also backs up to the property. She sent a letter in, and she couldn't make it tonight, so she sent a letter in. It's just not a good night for a lot of people.
Bob Bostich lives at the last house at the top of that.
There's basically 4 or 5,
We're on Holly
4 and
Way.
a half right out of.
We have 2 houses on Holly.
I'm just wondering specifically about people who back up to the site and what their thoughts are on it. I mean, not that I don't want to hear your
Oh,
thoughts,
yeah,
but
no.
in regards to what I was thinking, please don't let me discourage anyone from talking.
Holly Way, sorry.
Yeah, the person on Mark Way that's closest to it, to the southeast side on the property there, right next to it, I have talked to her. Her biggest concern is also them looking down right into, because her bedroom is on that side, looking right down into her bedroom and into her property. The drainage basin is right there. And what happens when that overflows? Where's that water gonna go? I was already flooded out once because of that, back a few years ago. So the drainage I am concerned about, just to let you know. But I realize there's nothing you guys can do about it probably, but we did get flooded out. I mean, I floated.
Well, they're approved to build it the way it is, but the drainage
Yeah, so
won't be affected.
it's as long as it goes.
That's what the natural drainage is there. They're gonna have to control, I'm sure, any water that's coming off their property.
Okay.
So it'll actually probably, I would
Right.
think, would improve because they
Yeah,
have to
because-
in order to take care of the water coming
The
off.
only place it had to go was hit the freeway and back up into our property at that time, so that was taken care of, but adding more water to it, putting in asphalt, where water just runs off the asphalt, isn't soaked down into the ground, is gonna cause even more runoff. So that was her concerns, and then the fencing and them looking over because it's so much higher than our properties.
Thank you. Okay, bring it back for further discussion or a motion.
Commissioner Wiggins, question for staff. You talked about code enforcement. Does that write tickets, or is that being able to revoke the special use permit?
It could be a citation. There's two enforcement methods on special use permits. It could be a citation that we would have to take to a judge, but for special use permits, we typically bring them to the planning commission for possible revocation. There is code section that applies to that for any violations of the conditions.
And a little further clarification, Leon, is there any control on vehicle size, type of vehicle, trailers, motorhomes, VW van that goes?
Heather Ferris for the record, as long as it meets the definition of an RV, There's no regulation on our end, however, the operator may have some operational guidelines.
Due to site size or parking size or whatever.
And I think to your question too, I was going to say based on the, so that NRS section is specifically regulations between landlords and tenants. It's all regulations between landlords and tenants, and whether or not that may or may not apply depending on how they rent out their space. But in any case, I was going to say, whatever that says, they cannot have a manufactured home, mobile home, in a spot here. It is limited to RVs by city code. So that's what she was saying, where they have to comply with both. Just because that says that doesn't mean they can put mobile homes, manufactured homes.
But you could come in with a pickup and a fifth wheel and park it, like that, all that, says it.
Another question for you, and this is something I never thought about, is do we have a term of the SUP, a link to the SUP for us to review it at a later date?
There's not a length of, there's not a review period written into the code that's required. It's been placed as a condition of approval by the planning commission in certain cases. Typically, obviously there are.
Okay. The other question I have is, if we approve this all the way here, and then there was a concern on phase 3 in regards to line of sight, is there any way that this board could actually address that at a later date after phase 3, if that's a concern?
Not without a condition of approval that would be required to come back.
Well, but even if we revoke the SUP is only for stay.
Yeah, but it would
It's only
certainly
linked to
give,
stay.
it would certainly give the developer or property owner motivation to
Could-
lights on site problem.
Could, yeah, you could use it as a leverage, but I still say that this whole issue is only length of stay.
Yeah, that's basically what we're.
That's what we're talking about, is length of stay. Everything else.
Well, it is, but we can utilize this to also make sure that, you know, quality of life around the property around is maintained. We don't just have to limit it to 30 or 180 days. We can manipulate all those conditions. I mean, everyone here is right, but I think you're right, but I think we can certainly leverage to help homeowners if they, you know, to say, hey, let's readdress this in 2 years, which I was thinking about that anyways in terms of, are they sticking to their 180-day limit? You know, let's approve it and do the condition of relook at it like we did with that asphalt guy.
I'm not
I don't think you can
sure.
commit somebody, you can't commit somebody to put in several $1 million to start a project, and then so you gotta come back and we're gonna stop you.
If they don't, I mean, I'm just saying, we certainly can, certainly.
I mean, you have, just thinking out loud, you're at the end of an airport runway. There's limited use for that property as part of the reason it's zoned the way it is. And you're not gonna put a housing development in there, you're not gonna add any more houses in there because it wouldn't be safe for the runway, et cetera. So it was zoned this way. So all we're looking at is they don't even have to be here at 30 days. They're saying to make the investment, they need to be able to get longer term people to come in and hopefully stay. That's where the money comes in, better money, et cetera. We're not, whether we question that or not, it's just a matter of we're looking at getting somebody to have 180 days, nothing to do with taxes or anything else. They can do it all alone with the 30 days. They're saying they would rather have long stay where they don't have code enforcement come in and say they're turning around and coming back in and staying an extra week. So that's all we're looking at right now is do we approve going forward, letting him build the operation that he could do without even our consent for him to be able to stay 180 days.
Well, while that is what we're voting on, if that was the only thing we were responsible for looking at, there wouldn't be any of these conditions. So I guess I want to be on the record, I disagree. These conditions are put on here for us, you know, not just for us to look at, but for the applicant to meet in order to gain that 180-day thing. So we have every right, and not only that, responsibility.
I believe these conditions would be there in order to build it because of the building permit process.
But they're here
In
again.
some cases, that's true, there might be some that
But I mean,
won't necessarily be there, but the majority of them requirements of the code.
to meet code.
Right, and that's what we're, and we have, I understand, I understand.
Further discussion?
Is there any desire amongst the members of the commission to reduce the number?
Of spaces.
No, basically, we've been told, we discussed this last time, 60 days, 90 days, whatever. Basically, it's 30 days to one meeting. It's just, they have the option if they want to make it,
No, what I'm saying is if we approve the special permit with a 60-day stay or a 90-day stay.
I don't,
Okay.
I think they're seeing a need to go out, you know, basically out 4 or 5 months. I mean, we could ask the.
Well, the 180 days seems to make sense. I personally, I think that makes sense. Honestly,
Kind of follows what.
my personal feeling is just trying to make sure that the homeowners have as much of their concerns met while also developing this development and improving this. So that's all I'm not, I mean, I don't have a problem with 180 days. I'm just concerned. I don't want those 5 property owners to have their quality of life diminished at all. I don't think the developer wanted that either.
No, it's not possible.
Of course, they could come in and put something 30 feet away from them with.
That's a big
with
old
no argument
concrete
whatsoever.
building and
Yeah,
a- and
a little concrete
absolutely.
wall and whatever, with the dimensions as
Trucks
well.
coming in all night.
Yeah.
And that's, as I say, at least they've come inside the parameter, they've stretched out, got further away, et cetera, to try to use accommodating as they can. Further discussion or a motion? Mike, take a motion.
Okay. I move to approve SUP 18-181 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval, continue the staff report.
I'll second that. On the vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4 to 2.
4 to 2.
Is Commissioner Borders and
Commissioner,
Okay.
Tingle and Commissioner Borders.
I could not find finding number 1. That's why.
Before we really, I will note that this, so this is the final decision on special use permits unless it's appealed. Those that have standing to appeal that have been here tonight or wrote letters in can make appeal to the planning office within 10 days of today. It actually usually ends up falling on the 11th or 12th day on the Mondays, which will still accept. Contact the planning division office if you want more information on filing.
And that's to appeal to the supervisor.
That would-
It will go to the board of supervisors for final
If,
approval.
only if there's an appeal.
If there isn't.
This is the final decision unless there's an appeal.
Unless there's. Thank you. Yeah, we have time to do what, you want to break first? Do the water before we do water. Okay, we will recess as the planning commission, and we will reconvene as the growth management commission. Roll for determined, we have to do a roll call in here. Roll call for determination.
Chair Sattler,
Present.
Commissioner Borders.
Here.
Commissioner Doers.
Here.
Commissioner Preston. Here. Commissioner Tingle. Here. Commissioner Wiggins.
Here.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. Again, like we started the meeting, the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Growth Management Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. See no public comment at this time. Okay, for possible action, approval of the minutes for the May 30th, 2018 Growth Management meeting. Do had a chance to look them over, any changes or whatever? If not, I'll take a motion for accepting the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we accept the minutes as presented.
We have a motion from Commissioner Borders, a second. Second from Commissioner Tingle. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Abstentions, obviously, from newer members that weren't here for that meeting. Thank you, folks. Moving on, public hearing matter, GM-18-190 for possible action to consider a request for growth management approval to allow for the daily water uses of above the 15,500 gallon per day for a recreational vehicle resort facility on property zone tourist commercial TC located at 1400 Old Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-40.
Thank you, Heather Parrish for the record. At this point, I'm just going to hand it over to Stephen quickly to answer your questions.
Stephen Potato with Development Engineering. Just to give a recap, the item we just heard was SUP 18-181 for the record. If anyone wants to go back and get all those bullet points and the numbers, I went through all the water and sewer usage for this project. But again, 33,000 gallons per day for sewer is estimated, 1,500 gallons per minute for fire flow. And the domestic water is 68,500 gallons per day. If you like the scope and percent of capacity is. Wastewater treatment plant, you're looking at 0.5% of capacity. Fire flow, the available storage is 300% of was expected to be used. And domestic flow makes up 0.5% of the max take.
Any questions on the water flow? Thank you for the precise figures on that. Any questions for staff on it? I don't think the applicant probably has nothing to add. I don't know. With
Nothing that wasn't already said.
Okay. Then public comment. Any public comment on the water issue? If not, we'll bring it back for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
It's been my experience in having done this with an RV park that had individual meters, that the consumption was anywhere between 50 and 80 gallons a day.
Thank you for that.
Which, and that's sometimes on the high side. But that more than, I think, fits into the, you know, it fits into what we're proposing. It's a whole lot less than what we're lifting the ceiling to, so I don't think it's an issue.
Right, and when the applicant eventually went on the high side, just to consider.
Well, 100 gallons a day is 3,000 gallons a year, which is basically what a house should consume. And, you know, RVs don't do that. But it was in my experience that it was like 60 to 80 gallons per day. So,
Thank you for that input. Any other comment from, not? Do we have a motion?
I have a motion.
Commissioner Doers.
Commissioner Doers, I move to approve GM 18-190, subject to the conditions of approval outlined in staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Commissioner Borders, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
We'll take a 5 or 10 minute break.
Well, we were done.
Before we take a break,
I'm
I'm sorry. Oh, that's right, I forgot, we're still in the. We haven't got this okay. For possible action, make a motion to adjourn the road.
Before we come to possible action, we need to have one more.
One more. Sorry. Is there any more public comment with program management before we adjourn? Seeing none.
I move to adjourn the growth management.
Commissioner Tingle moves to adjourn, second. Commissioner Borders, all in favor? Aye. We will reconvene as the planning commission. back of a short break. Thank
This is my second night in I already have the back Yeah. Last night I was like this.
Isn't your thing that's
Yeah, that's good. How about yourself? Yeah, busy? Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I was hoping to be on the mission the same thing, but unfortunately, I changed my plans a little bit, so I found out that my needs changed.
So you need a promise here.
Sorry, gotta come back. So I didn't want to leave. Anyway, we'll be getting back in touch with you down the road. I gotta close on that property.
Have you developed this? The other things look?
They're going up and then, you know, just this space. It's just shy away from it. It's just such a special little area. It's like hospitality. Yeah, I lost my finance in the second time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm working.
Can you plan to build them?
Yeah, it's one of those like additional headaches, you know? Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of want to see what they're going to do. You know, yeah, see what they want, what the commission asks.
This time when he voted yes last time, it was a 6-0 vote 2 years ago. And he's the one of the other guys that was, anyway, strange that he voted now. So. Anyway, good seeing you. Take care. That's you.
No, I'm a reporter for the Appeal. She's the woman there. But she records it and does it later. She's not taking notes. Yeah. That's why she's so big anxious in the microphone. People yell from her. Yes, listen to her.
It's not consistent.
The other room's a lot more comfortable. I don't know if it's cushion in it, chairs and cushion, it's like a big room. It's just a lot more comfortable. I wish they would run it. Well, they're doing construction on the cigar rooms, that's why we're not. Right, they're replacing all the audio.
I'm not going to do this.
That's my house.
You guys have fun last weekend? The food was exceptional. I've never had it. Stuff actually came out good. Most of the time it's probably.
That's where they want to build.
Yeah, and then the afternoon. This is fun. Pitched it like a little
On the south side.
You know what you're.
Howard Stark.
Because that's a slope of the
Thank you.
like Harris Street. Everything else is a slope in excess of 30%. The green stuff is 15 to 30%. There's no way they can develop it.
As long as it doesn't something to down.
Or a space that goes down.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen your sloping houses, and I cut.
No, we're right there. They have like 2 lots and an RV. So original.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You guys?
Yeah. Oh, you're right there. Yeah, I saw my.
Billy. This is my wife Lori. Billy?
Lori.
Troy, come around this
Sorry, son, I'm
We're seeing what's
What's involved? Yeah, what's your problems? Very good.
So this is the one just down.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, Lonnie.
Okay.
You running the camera back there?
So we're gonna share.
Yeah, well, how does that work? You just watching it from like your phone or something?
Yeah.
Just have the screen pointed to the side here.
So you can see
and I
what's.
just got a real wide shot.
It's taken us a year
This is
to get to this point.
Yeah.
really I just made an executive decision. I'm just gonna set it up right now. You can hear him, see who's talking.
I know, just bring your cat up there.
Easy job.
And you don't know what to do. No. Somehow pretty simple.
And here.
Here, my virtual driveway.
But am I right in saying
Moving on, we will now reconvene as the planning commission. You don't have to have a roll call. Thank you. SUP-18-184 for possible action to consider a request for a special use permit to develop a portion of a parcel with an average slope of 33% or more located on property zone single-family 1 acre and located on the west side of Knoll Drive, APN 007-131-19 and -20. Hope.
Thank you. Hope Sullivan, planning manager. For the benefit of the commission and I know the members of the audience, I'll be referring to the colorful graphic that's the last page of your report in a little bit. So this is a request for a special use permit to allow development on land with an average slope of 33%. The subject property is on the west side of Knoll Drive and consists of 2 lots. One's 2.33 acres, the other 2.16 acres. Both lots are vacant, both lots have steep slopes. The applicant is proposing to merge the lots and build a 2,966 square foot home with a height of 26 feet, utilizing a well and septic. The site will be served by a 1,010-foot long driveway. The municipal code outlines the objectives of the hillside ordinance, including the intent is to minimize development that will contribute to landslides, erosion, sedimentation, deforestation, flooding, and the aesthetic degradation of the natural environment. With these objectives in mind, I requested the slope analysis, which is the last page of your packet. My concern in requesting this slope analysis is I wanted to be sure that we were altering slopes because of the necessity, because of how they were on site as opposed to trying to take advantage of a certain view or something. So for example, if this had demonstrated to me that the slopes closer to the road were less than the 33%, and indeed the house could have been placed on the lot and we could have avoided the slopes in excess of 33%, my report today and that you received would have been very different. What you can see in this exhibit is clearly right along the road where that purple is, those slopes are in excess of 30%. You can't develop this site without altering slopes in excess of 33%. For that reason, I am supporting this. However, given the objectives of the Hillside Development Ordinance, I am recommending 3 conditions that I want to highlight for you. Number 1 is that the site must be stabilized and revegetated prior to building occupancy. And I clarify in condition number 6, this means the plants must be growing in the disturbed area, not just hydroseeding, but growing. If you have hydroseeding, you don't get it watered, it's not going to take, and even if you do water it, sometimes it doesn't take. And so we want to make sure that we have plants and roots in place that are going to help stabilize that hillside. Condition number 12, suggesting that areas that are not to be disturbed during construction be fenced off during construction, and signs placed on the fencing noting the purpose of the fencing and advising that construction equipment is not allowed within the fenced-in areas. This way, those areas that aren't intended for disturbance will be protected during the construction process and won't be accidentally disturbed. The third condition I want to highlight was condition number 13, which is a requirement for a staging plan that's part of the construction documents. It's important that the staging not compromise the functionality of that roadway. If you had a chance to go out there, you saw it's a narrow road. So we have to figure out where the workers parking, how is this, where deliveries coming in, where are they storing equipment, where are they storing materials. We also want to make sure that the staging doesn't compromise those areas of the site that aren't intended to be disturbed. So we don't want them to start storing all the materials where we're supposed to be protecting the hillside or having the employees work there or something. So I did want to flag those two because I think this is a really important part of our code and we don't deal with that frequently, but these are really sensitive areas. You did receive a letter with the lake material basically highlighting that this is a sensitive area. I agree entirely with that letter. I don't think it's necessary for the commission or for neighbors to review the construction document. I think Stephen Cote and his team can do a good job making sure the structural design is sound and the geotechnical standards are met. Having said that, it is a special use permit. You can only approve it if you can meet the 7 required, or make the 7 required findings in the affirmative. I have done so in the staff report, and I am recommending approval. With that, I'll answer any questions. Angela Goose is here representing the applicant, and I believe the property owners are present. And with that, I'll stop.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Borders.
Knoll Drive, is that a public street?
It's public up to a point.
It's private road.
Yeah, well, I noticed that the last end of it, right past this lot,
With the gate.
has a gate and a sign on it that says private property, and it looks like it only services that one house or 2 houses that are there. So I didn't know, I was reading, to go back to your staging, that would seem to be a better place to stage if it was a public road, to just use a little bit of that area as opposed to trying to drive up and down the hill, but I didn't know if it was a public street or not.
I did observe that gate as well, and looking at the map on the first page of the staff report, I suspect the gate is definitely accessing that last parcel, given how it looks in the field.
So this is right, this is before you get to the private road sign, it's the property just to the left, it's not past it.
I don't know where the sign is, I remember where the gate is.
That's where the gate is right there, okay. I thought that was down here.
No.
Right when you came off, there's a.
No. Well, there may be, but there's one right here.
Oh, because it said, oh, maybe it was private road ahead then or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I stopped here, it said private road.
Yeah, it says no access or something.
Well, that's ferry access, right, when we have to turn around. But yeah, so we haven't dictated what the staging plan looks like, we just created performance standards to
Okay.
protect the road and access.
Other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Good evening, for the record, Angela Hoos, here with Loomis and Associates, today on behalf of the applicant and owner. As self-described, this is a special use permit for grading. We have tried to mitigate some of the concerns by designing the site the way it is. I mean, just for instance, if you look at the road, the driveway, it's over 1,000 feet. You're thinking, well, why didn't you just do a straight road? We tried to mitigate the impacts of the grading by doing more of that circuitous road, kind of an S-shaped road, which is obviously more money and more work on that end, but it reduces the impact of the grading. We don't have to put in really tall walls. We can limit it to 4-foot tall retaining walls. a lot of our retaining walls. We also have drainage features so that to address the concerns in that letter. We've incorporated some of these mitigation measures so that we make sure we're dealing with any off-site drainage, any sediment issues. All that has been designed as part of the special use permit that's before you today. So I feel like we've addressed the concerns of the neighbor really even before we had, knew that the neighbor was concerned with those issues. We are in agreement with the proposed conditions of approval, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Looks like many of the homes up there are placed on some fairly substantial slopes. So,
It
lovely
is.
area up there.
It's beautiful, yeah.
View lots and that sort of thing. Questions for the applicant?
Do you need permission from the dozen deer that were up there?
Did you see?
Yeah.
Do we need permission from the deer?
No, thank you. We'll bring it back. Public comment. Would you like to come forward? Sure. State your name.
My name is William Lavelle. I own the lot that's just adjacent to their lots.
Above?
Yes.
The one in
The last one just before where the steel gate is.
Okay.
So I just wanted to offer up if it assists in their endeavors to get that done, the use of our property during the development, because I won't be able to develop mine for a while yet. So if that would help in keeping things safe.
You have steep slopes too, though.
I do, but I have an easement, so
Okay, we'll
it's
figure
there.
it out.
Okay, just want to offer that.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
If you want to just spell
Those must have been your deer.
Any other public comment on this item? If not, I'll bring it back for further discussion.
I'm just glad I don't have to clean the driveway, it's snow.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve a modification of SUP -18-184 based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Second.
You have a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Are we modifying?
Modify what?
Well, that's what I read over.
He says I move to approve a modification.
Oh, no,
Oh.
you're not modifying here.
We need to restate it.
Yeah.
What is the proper wording? The recommended motion is I move to
Just move to
approve.
approve.
I move to approve SUP -18-184 based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Now reset.
And you second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a second. For possible action, VAR-18-179, for possible action to consider a request for variance to establish setback building heights and driveway lanes for Silver Oaks, page 23A and B, located on the east end of Radcliffe Drive on property zone single-family 12,000, plan unit development SF12-P007-552-42.
Chair Sullivan, planning manager. The Silver Oak tentative plan unit development was approved by the board of supervisors in 1993. It's been with us for a while. The development was for 683 acres, 1,181 residential lots with a commercial area as well. In 2005, the city staff and the applicant decided to utilize the variance procedure to create the dimensional criteria for the various phases of Silver Oak. The variance process was used for phases 16, 17, 18, 20, and 22. The applicant is seeking to utilize this process to establish the dimensional criteria for phase 23A and 23B. The staff has been working closely with the applicant in reviewing the original approvals from the 1990s using those as a baseline, and then identifying areas that would be modified for phase 23. So you may see some slight disconnects between the applicant's letter and the staff report saying the applicant proposes, because I think we probably met at least 5 times to kind of try to make sure we had this right and to understand what the development agreements from 1993 said versus what the applicant was seeking. So essentially, where we ended up is in condition 5 of your staff report. Condition 5 outlines exactly what the supplemental dimensional criteria is that this applicant is seeking. Where to the extent it's not addressed in condition 5, we default to the development agreements that were adopted in the 1990s. So that's our baseline document. What I want to stress, and one of the most important parts of condition number 5 is the very end of it. And I want to read it out loud because I know I've had a lot of phone calls and visits from people from University Heights, which is not part of Silver Oak, very concerned about how this is going to impact their property. And this was crafted to make sure there were no changes to the residential lots at University Heights. So right there in condition 5, it says, notwithstanding the above, development standards for lots adjacent to University Heights residential lots will have a 20-foot setback from the shared property line with the residential lot at University Heights, be limited to 1 story in height, and have a maximum building height of 22 feet. That is the exact language that appears in the 1990 development agreements. That was a stipulation that Walt Sullivan, who's here today, helped realize. And we made sure that to avoid any confusion, we included that in the wording today. With that, in general, I find that the request is similar to the other variances. What's happening in Silver Oak is in those development agreements from the 1990s, you kind of had a sliding scale setback. If the lot was this size, your setback was X. If your lot was a different size, your setback was Y. If you're yet one more, your setback was Z. What that would yield is various setbacks all within a single phase. What you'll achieve here is you'll have uniformity in setbacks within the phase, so when you walk down the sidewalk, all the streets are at the same setback. The side yard setbacks are the same, the rear yard setbacks are the same, as opposed to having that sliding scale that was initially contemplated. So staff is recommending approval of this, and we're primarily recommending approval because I feel like I've been really careful, and I have to say, Mark Turner's been very cooperative in making sure that this was crafted to not adversely impact any of the residents at University Heights, and to make sure that nothing changed adjacent to their property line. With that, I'm happy to take questions, and Mark Turner, who's the applicant, is present.
If they want to change any of these, you got to come into this week for special use permit.
No. What these are, okay, right now there's a final map pending. That final map will create the lots for phase 23. When the lots, those don't exist yet. When the lots in phase 23 come to exist and they go to develop them, they will follow the rules that you see in condition 5. And to the extent the rules in condition 5 aren't addressing the issue, we then would go to the 1993 development agreement. Is it 93 or 98? So yeah, so we're actually, after this, we should be purely ministerial, and you probably won't see anything.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Mark Turner from Silver Oak Development Company. We have read the conditions put forth by staff. We agree with them, and as Hope alluded to, we spent a significant amount of time in discussion making sure that we dotted the i's, crossed the t's. We also reached out to residents at University Heights subdivision, most notably Mr. Walt Sullivan, who was very intimately involved with the approval of the planned unit development agreement over 25 years ago. And we tried to make sure that everybody was included in the process, and we're definitely on board with what staff recommends. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Public comment. Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, members of the staff, we are Walter and Celine Sullivan, and we reside at 3433 Dartmouth Drive, Carson City. We have met with both the staff, Hope Sullivan, and the applicant, Mark Turner. We've read the staff report and are in concerns with the staff report, specifically condition number 5 dealing with the adjacent lots in the development and in the lots in University Heights PUD number 2. And that one specific condition in condition number 5, page 2, that Ms. Sullivan read into the record, notwithstanding above the development standards for the lots adjacent to University Heights residential lots shall have a 20-foot setback from the shared property line with residential lots in University Heights be limited to 1 story in height and shall have a minimum building height of 22 feet. That's maximum, excuse me, maximum building height. And that's to the midpoint of the roof level. That is at 22 feet. There could be a little 2, 3 feet, 4 feet, whatever, above that. At the time that this development went through in 1993, I was the community development planning director for the city. I stepped back and let staff handle the development to go through. I really didn't get involved at the planning commission level. The gentleman, Heath Evans, who was at the planning commission meeting and read everything, and my wife, who put everything together, went to the planning commission meeting. He unfortunately was called to a meeting out of town. He was with USGS, and I became involved at the Board of Supervisors meeting. But I had stepped down and was not involved at that time. Since being retired for some 10 years now, this is actually my first planning commission meeting back.
Welcome back.
So that's a little bit of the background. We have, like I said, we've met with Hope Sullivan several times to go over the variance in question. We've met with Mr. Turner 2 or 3 times. My wife, how she found it, I don't know. She found the planning commission and the board of supervisors meeting, the videotape of both of those meetings. She has the only record. The city doesn't have record. The television station no longer has those tapes. She has the only record in Carson City, Nevada, of that approval of that subdivision.
You may have one of the only VCRs left in town.
Well, we have borrowed that.
I have a copy while Celine emailed it to me.
Back then, we got all the neighbors. There's 8 or 9 homes on Dartmouth. We had a neighbor here earlier tonight, Stan Schaefer. He had to go home. And we can speak on his behalf tonight. He gave us that authority. He is actually the only original homeowner still there, and he's in agreement with condition number 5 as it states tonight. We're the second oldest, but we were one of the original ones. We're kind of Johnny come early, I guess. And we feel that this condition that was proposed back in 1993, we would like, again, that the planning commission approve the variance that we're discussing tonight, have it in the approval this evening as well. Sorry if I'm hopping around, but walking my dog is something nice, probably helps. Anyway.
It's nice speaking from the commission standpoint to see neighbors able to get together and get things resolved, working with staff, et cetera,
Back then they called us the Dartmouth 8 and people didn't know who were
not sure what was going to go in front of there and all that back then.
But let me tell you, you have a wonderful staff. She has a wonderful last name, but you have a wonderful staff. Kathy Green, she does. pedigree, wrote an excellent staff report, and I had not had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Turner, but maybe 1 or 2 times over the times before we met this time, and he's been very, very nice to meet and discuss the issue and agree to the condition of approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, may, while the Sullivans are at the podium, first, no relation. Secondly, Celine Sullivan wanted me to put on the record, and I will do this, to clarify that stormwater patterns that currently exist will continue to exist. So when phase 23 gets developed, the property owners upstream will not suddenly see a stop to any runoff that currently exists. That will be managed by downstream properties.
I'm the city planner and family, she's a civil engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Borders.
I move to approve variance 18-179 based on the findings and subject to all the conditions that the approval contained in the staff report.
You have a motion, you have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Trefferth, second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Very nice meeting you. We'll be in touch.
Yes, as I say, it's nice to get together and resolve issues.
Next door.
Did you get me? Don't be strange.
Moving on. For
Mark, can you just go together with 2 minutes?
SUP-18-166 for possible action to continue a request for special use permit for a new 70-foot tall wireless communication facility on property zone retail commercial RC to the February 27, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. The subject property is located at 3331 South Carson Street, APN 009-12-17.
Thank you, Heather Byers. For the record, staff is requesting the commission continue this matter. We continue to work with the applicant on the aesthetics of the pole, and they expect to be prepared for the February 27th, 2019 meeting.
Questions of staff? It's pretty straightforward. Public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for approval or motion. I guess we don't need a motion.
Yeah.
Oh, we do need a motion.
I move to continue SUP 18-166 to the Planning Commission meeting of February 27, 2019.
A motion, Commissioner Borders seconds, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. That one's done. Last item under items, I-4, for possible action to elect a planning commission chair and vice chair for a term beginning at the planning commission meeting of February 2019. The commission bylaws provide for election of chair and vice chair to be held in January, to be serving one-year term beginning in February. Guess we will open the.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we elect Mark Sadler as the chairman of the commission for one more year.
Is there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, we'll close the nomination. All in favor?
Aye.
Second.
Yeah, we didn't get a second.
Oh, do we have a second?
I second.
Commissioner Tingle seconds.
And just for the record, if you could restate the motion.
All right, I would like to restate the motion that the commission elect Mark Sadler as our chairman for the beginning of February.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will now open the nominations for vice chair.
Before we move on to that, Chair Sadler, did you abstain?
Yes.
I normally you would vote for yourself, I would think.
Okay. I heard you abstain.
He said that.
We just wanted to clarify
Thank you.
for the record.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Charles Borders for the vice chair for the term beginning at the Planning Commission meeting of February 2019.
And I'll second that. All in favor? All right, excuse me, there are the nominations. Seeing none, we'll open that up for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstaining.
Commissioner Borders abstains. All right, thank you. Moving on, staff reports, non-action item, director's report, please.
So just a couple updates on items that were previously before the planning commission. The 2 zoning map amendments that we reviewed for Cochise Street and South Park was approved, and also the zoning map amendment along with the tentative subdivision map for the plateau development. On the far east and
The one we voted on last time.
Oh, by the landfill?
yeah.
That was approved.
For February, we've got another decent agenda going in terms of, got some applications in. Got special use permits for some model home signs. We have a special use permit for accessory structure. The cell tower special use permit continued, should be back. We anticipate getting some updated design on the cell tower from them. We plan on having the water capacity analysis report to you, the land use development and capacity analysis from the Public Works Department. I'll bring it back to you at that meeting in February. DA's office is going to have some open meeting law training for you. There's a new video that's been developed. We're going to learn more about it. I think are we doing those at meetings? Do you know, is that the plan?
I believe that's the plan, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not 100%.
Okay, we'll find out in the next month, but we'll have some open meeting law training for you next month, and possibly start some discussion about how we're gonna go through Title 18, do a Title 18 review over the next year or so. That's all I have.
Lee, I understand open meetings. Do we ever get any training in open records? We ever talk about?
You don't. I don't know. We know because all city departments get requests for public records. All those requests go through the district attorney's office, so they make sure we're on track.
Yeah, in general, I don't believe that we've provided a public records training. If the commission as a whole was interested in that, request it, and we can consider it.
Well, I know there's some things I've had experience in, there's things we probably shouldn't.
Yeah, if you have any questions personally, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Ben.
I just, as a matter of course, I just don't know if we would do it for the commission.
Yeah, for example, knowing about your emails, you know, the correspondence related to this is being public records and things like that. That everybody knows that. Yeah, that'd be a good topic to bring up next time.
I'll let Ben and Dan, you know about it. I'm sure they'll be in touch.
Well, I'm thinking if we're gonna take the time to have the open meetings discussion, if you added on 5 minutes and just said, oh, by the way, you ought to need to know about this too. Here's some things you should remember. It might be helpful for all of us.
And for commissioner comments and reports, I would like to, on the record, welcome Shirley Quiggins, our new commissioner. Welcome aboard. Normally these meetings aren't quite as loose and It's, you know, that you've seen the others, but the room kind of dictated that this time. But anyway, we should be back in our normal room in February, correct?
Yes, for sure.
Any other commissioner comments or anything? Public comment? At this point, I don't see none. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So
Commissioner, so moved, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? So